Hello, my name is Mordred Viking, and I'd like to welcome you to this new series, I guess, of Europa Universalis 4. Now, the previous one I had to stop because basically the save game was corrupted after I updated to the latest patch. Most of the problems I noticed were superficial, so for example the ideas were messed up and I was getting too many diplomats and things like that. However, I was concerned that there might be some underlying issues as well, which didn't come to the surface immediately, so I decided to start a new one instead. Now, the previous Random New World was very interesting. I did enjoy it. However, there was a big problem in that a lot of the random nations just had really random ideas. So I thought, well, I can actually introduce up to 32 new countries and create my own random setups. So I've actually done that. I got bored after 20, I'm afraid. It actually takes quite a lot of effort. So there are 20 new nations hidden in this area right here. You probably can tell which ones are new because they end with Caster. So for example, Lancaster is a new one, as is Stormcaster over here, and Provencaster. And then any of the other countries that you see in between them are basically just filling up space, which is fine. They'll still be the worse off ideas. They may be able to put up a fight, they may not. I don't know. There are, let's see, 3 or 4 in France, there's 3 in Spain, 2 in England, 2 in Scandinavia, 4 or 5 in the HRE, 3 over here, and you'll also notice I have a couple of hordes. That's basically because I just wanted to add a little more spice. There's basically hordes coming in from the east, so we've got the Ark horde up here, the Mush horde here, and the Gull horde here. So obviously that's Muscovy, Archangelisk, and the Golden horde. I've also added some more, so for example down here we have the Nom horde, Nomad horde, just because it's really flat and I thought they'd do quite well over there. There's also a couple more, one more in India and 3 more in China, I think. Part of the reason for that is the whole of East Asia was basically just one massive country, and I really wanted to split that up. I mean, we had that last time with Guangdong. It would have gotten a bit boring. At least when Ming does that, Ming has a special government, so they tend to break apart. That special government doesn't appear to be in this, so it won't. I did a quick test game just to make sure everything was working. We do indeed have a Holy Roman Emperor who is currently that guy, Potsdam. So HRE is working, which is good because we do have quite a few countries involved in the HRE. There is no Pope though, so the papacy is not working. Catholics can still use their influence and stuff, but it's going to be more difficult to tally up. So I kind of suspect we'll be seeing a very brisk reformation when that does break. Like in the previous game, we saw the whole of Germany basically became reformed and large parts of the northern area became Protestant. So, I have currently left this game open because I don't really know what I want to play as, to be quite honest. So I've given lots of different countries, lots of different bonuses. So, for example, Lancaster will play fairly similarly to England, but I wanted to break it up. I mean, the whole main reason for me for playing these custom nations is that you don't get the big blue blob, you don't get England taking over half the new world. There is a random new world, I'm purposefully not going over there. I have looked at it, it should be very interesting. But I just want to leave it for now, so there's at least some anticipation for you. I've added Morocco down here, which will have more colonial powers. Several of these seaside areas have extra colonist growth, not colonists though. I did actually start out creating countries with extra colonists, but that turned out to really reduce the power of any trading and naval powers, because that extra colonist was very expensive in terms of the custom nation generation thing, and that counted as a diplomatic power, so it meant you could take a lot less naval stuff. So I decided not to, and just hopefully we have enough competition in Europe that will actually survive until the colonial era for colonies to be interesting. So that's kind of a touch wood moment, but yeah. Okay, let's get stuck in. Like I said, there are 20 new factions. I have written myself a list, so I'll just go down the list. Number 1 is, of course, Lancaster. Lancastrian ideas are trade efficiency and interest per annum, and their ambition is build cost. Yeah, this... I'm just trying to think there's an easy way to kind of bring this information over to you, but I don't think there really is. So you'll just have to kind of make a mental note as I go through who sounds interesting and then make a decision afterwards. If you have any like tips or advice, please stick them in the comments. It's probably too late at this point to create new countries or edit the ones that are here already, but like names and stuff I can change. That's no problem. Like I actually had these all called casters, and that was really confusing because I wasn't going to play as the hordes. That's another point I should make. I'm not playing as a horde. That's just there to make it more interesting. And if you want like a recap on what countries do what, then just click back. This is a video. You can do that. So Lancaster, trade efficiency, interest, build cost. I'll just give a summary. So Lancaster is basically your naval power. They're going to be more of an aggressive naval power. So for example, they get light ships for cheap and they get embargoes, like really, really good embargoes. That's actually a really powerful ability. So when they're at sea, they can really blockade people, but they're not that big at trade. However, Stormcaster is good at trade. They are much the same as Stormwind was. I mean, I've even started them in the same location. I have changed them up a little bit. So for example, they get new technologies now, and the development stuff is later on rather than front loading it all. But they still get a lot of ships, and their heavy ships are better, so I've gone for more of a naval combat thing here. They still have good trade and also colonists. I've decided to give them global settler increase because they're on the west coast, so they'd get to the New World pretty easily. Hollcaster, that would be Holland. These guys are all out trade. So they start out with interest per annum and global trade power, just so they can meddle a bit more. Then they get extra, like, really moderately good heavy ships. Nothing compared to Stormcaster, but still good. More ships, more trade. Mercenaries. They can field large armies of mercenaries and then give them extra morale, discipline, and trade steering. So they'll be able to shift trade around more as well. Stormcaster we've kind of covered. We covered them. Porcaster, that is Portugal. These guys are obviously very colonial. So they start out with national tax modifier just so they have a bit more cash. Diplomatic relations so they can survive the early game with new allies. Then in come the global settlers so they can get more colonies. Bit of morale of armies, bit of development so they can develop their homeland so that liberty desire isn't such a big issue. Forts, they can be a little less careful about where they leave their armies, so if they go and fight a war somewhere, then Portugal itself will be fairly well defended. Really good trade. They're very strong at trade, moderate at discipline and good trade steering. And they also get prestige. So prestige in this helps with keeping liberty desire high, in that if you have negative prestige, you lose liberty desire. So I thought it would be a good idea to give them a bit of prestige. Okay, that is Portugal. Francaster, which is France. These guys are kind of here as a counter to the English and the Dutch, because, as you know, this is all the English Channel. So, their powers are mostly militaristic, obviously. National manpower, aggressive expansion, reduction in cost, and then lots of morale for armies. They get better, much better cavalry, actually. Wow, I don't remember I put it that high. National tax, so more money, better development. Provincial trade power modifier. So this is all the trade that they themselves produce in their provinces is boosted by 20%. So that means you're going to have to kill them in order to make them lose the trade there. They won't be able to compete very much like abroad because they don't have any naval modifiers. But at home, they're going to be very, very strong. So you want to take the fight to them, basically. Their build cost, they can build more discipline and land force limits, so they can get a bigger army. Fairly self-explanatory. Okay, Provencaster, so that's Provence. These guys are here as kind of a counter to Genoa and to Spain, so I've purposefully stretched them across. I'm hoping will join the colonial fight, and they should have a couple of interesting tools to do that. So interest per annum, that means they can take loans and basically fight better in the early game with mercenaries and stuff. Trade steering, so they can shift money around and kind of concentrate more money here in France or shift it over into Genoa if that is the more valuable thing to do. Light ships, they can build more light ships. Loads more mercenaries, because I am worried about them fighting against France, so they need an army to back them up, and they have a lot of mercenaries to do that. Light ship combat ability, so they can fight the galleys and stuff here in the Mediterranean and basically do anything like that. National unrest, I guess I just had that to balance discipline and trade efficiency. Did I say what the top off one? Oh yeah, infantry combat. Okay, that's them. Burguncaster, obviously Burgundy. These guys are more of the diplomatic game. They are actually not based in Burgundy. They are based in... Their capital is one of these. So they are actually in the HRE. So they are viable to become the emperor. That is important because they always kind of lose out because they're not really in the HRE, but they have lots of territories that are. Well, their capital now is, so they are a member. The emperor will come to their aid if they are attacked, rather than attacking them all the time. So their things are morale of armies and diplomatic relations. They get more allies, and their top off is discipline. So they get bigger army, they get more money, cheaper ideas, more prestige, just because prestige just seems useful, cheaper build cost, diplomatic reputation. So not only can they have more alliances, but they can have alliances with better people, and monthly war exhaustion, so they can recover from all the fighting that they will undoubtedly be doing. Okay, the next one has a bit of a strange name. It's Meteor Caster, which is actually Milan Tyrol Caster, because they own Tyrol. They have one of the big gold mines. And as a result, they have yearly inflation reduction, so the gold won't actually count against them. They'll just be able to make money from it. Likewise, production efficiency increases the amount of gold they make. So these guys are going to be very rich for a non-trading power. They are also a republic, Oligarchic Republic, and I've given them Republican tradition, because you know how much I was moaning about that before. They get some morale of armies, so their armies fight better, better tax, more provincial trade, so again you have to root them out in order to compete with them, and that's good because they'll have Genoa and Venice against them. Diplomatic reputation, so they can get better allies, so people aren't always trying to nick the gold from them. Discipline and artillery combat ability. I'm expecting them to have a lot of money, so they'll be able to field a lot of cannon. And then fort defense, they can be a little more defensive. That's Meteor Caster, Gencaster. So this is fairly easy. I mean, they're going to be a big trading power, but because of all the strong competitors in this Genoa node, I think they will have some really, really interesting gameplay, especially with these guys, Hollcaster, and I'll get to them in a minute. They're probably one of the more interesting. So, Gencaster here. They have got global trade power and mercenary cost. These guys are very, very strongly in mercenaries, much like Provencaster were. So mercenary cost means mercenaries are cheaper, so they can get technically more of them, even though there aren't necessarily more available. Trade efficiency, self-explanatory. Available mercenaries, there you go, so they can not only have them for cheaper, but more of them. Tech cost, so they can do a little more development. Likewise, idea cost. Larger navy, though not as big as some naval powers, so they will need to be careful and pick their fights accordingly. They also do not have any galley improvements, so they'll need to pick what warships they'll use and then basically build them en masse or fight the enemy on land. Trade steering and national tax modifier. So that is Gencaster. Islecaster. So Islecaster own a whole ton of islands. Over here they have the Baleares, they have Corsica, Sardinia, they have Sicily, Corfu, this is really a geography test, Crete, Rhodes, Cyprus, and loads of the little Greek islands. The only real connection, I mean, their capital is here in Sicily, it is Messina, I believe, so they could be attacked by Apulia, which is not one of the custom ones. But these guys are going to have a huge navy, and they have several abilities to kind of prove that as well. So I have actually done a game before as a Shinto Isles nation, just like this, and it proved to be really, really interesting actually, because they get a surprising amount of money because the amount of trade they can control, so they can really meddle in other people's affairs and stay relatively safe themselves. So their abilities are global trade power, obviously, mercenary cost, they can get a couple of troops, and fort defense, so later on they can stick a fort in one of these places and hopefully hold. Although I was also mindful that you don't necessarily want to put a fort on an island, because if someone lands you want them to basically leave, so you're not having the landing penalty. But because of the maneuver ability, that might be offset, I think. So trade efficiency, more money, more available. That's Genoa still, my bad. So trade efficiency, global trade power, so they're going to be very money. Ship durability, their ships will be extremely tough. So if their light ships get into a fight by accident, or even their galleys, they'll be able to take a lot of punishment. They might not necessarily be doing much damage themselves, but they won't be losing ships. They get development costs, they can build up their islands, it's going to be very important. Naval force limit modifier, so lots more ships. These guys are going to have a huge navy. Discipline, just they can fight a bit better and retake the islands when they lose them. Trade steering, so they can meddle. That's the whole point behind them. Unrest, so you don't have to deal with the rebellions on the islands. Siege ability, so if someone does take one of the forts you've put on an island, you can take it back very quickly. Likewise, you will be able to do very quick guerrilla attacks against people. So if you're at war like Ottocaster over here, you could nip off over here, take that siege, jump back on the ships, and then move back over to attack someone else before their armies can regroup and then retaliate. So that could be quite interesting. Morale of armies just so they can stick around longer in a fight. So that is Islecaster. Next up is Auscaster, which is I almost said Australia. Austria. These guys are quite obviously built around diplomacy and the HRE. They get extra relations and diplomatic annexation costs. So the relations means they can take more vassals. The annexation cost means they can then annex those vassals for cheaper. They get more morale, so they can fight. More diplomatic reputation. That helps both in annexing vassals, it does it quicker, and for making alliances with people. So Austria are going to be one to look out for in terms of just the number of allies they bring to the fight. Much like Burgundy, there's quite a few similarities between these two, to be fair. Imperial rule, so they'll be looking to become emperor. National manpower modifiers, they have more troops. Interest, so they can use mercenaries if they need to. Discipline, so they can fight better. And prestige decay. Prestige is useful for, again, diplomatic entreaties and stuff. And then artillery combat ability. I think I just did that for kind of the coolness factor. Brancaster. So these guys are Brandenburg. There is a Prussia over here. Don't be put off by that. Brancaster is Brandenburg. That is the Prussia to be. These guys are the elite soldiers. So we have national tax modifiers, so they can actually pay for the army. Yearly army tradition, so that their army tradition remains high. That impacts morale and the quality of your generals. It's actually a very, very important thing. And plus 10 discipline. That is the highest that I've given out, I think. Morale of armies plus 10%. Aggressive expansion, so they can expand without quite so many people getting peeved at them. More infantry combat. It's not as high as Brandenburg in vanilla game, but it's still there. Diplomatic reputation, so their allies will be more likely to stick by them and so they can get better allies. War exhaustion, well that's fairly obvious, to get rid of war exhaustion. Prestige, for a similar reason, was it Burguncaster? Well, basically prestige is morale as well, so their morale will be huge. And then production efficiency, so they can actually pay for all this stuff. And I'm expecting them to go more inland rather than trying to go abroad over the sea. Though they are coastal, so that is an option, though they have no abilities that are actually naval. Jutcaster. Now this is again where I've kind of played with the positioning. I could have called them Denmark, but that wouldn't necessarily be true because they do not control Sjælland, which is their capital. And that was kind of the obvious place to start them. I did think about that. But their capital is actually in Holstein. The reason being, Holstein is in the HRE. So, one of the big weaknesses of Denmark is they was attacked by the HRE, but now the HRE will actually defend them. The HRE in this game is very, very strong. So I'm very pleased there's an emperor, because that could have screwed stuff up. These guys are built for defense. That's all they're going to do. They're going to be extremely hard to take. So their specials are attrition for enemies, 1.5. That means every month that an enemy is in their territory, they are taking damage, regardless of whether they're under the supply limit or not. And fort defense, that means that they will be waiting longer to take that fort. And all the time, they'll be taking more attrition. Plus the forts themselves do one, so they're actually taking 2.5% of their entire army every single month. That is heavy. That's very heavy. Morale of armies, so they can stick in the fight. Provincial trade power, so again, they are built to stand here and take trade. And you're going to have to invade them to take the trade off of them, but that's going to be extremely difficult. Tech costs, so they can get a bit more technologies and hopefully invest in some development. Naval force limit, because they are very coastal and they do have some islands. I'm kind of hoping they'll go over here. Light ship costs, so they can do a little more of the trade stuff. Infantry combat, not that high, but every little helps. And then global trade power, so they can get a little more reach. So their homelands will be very secure, and then they can start meddling in other people's affairs. And then artillery combat ability, because I'm hoping they'll have money from all the trade. Okay, that's Jutcaster. Nordencaster. Called that because it's Norway and Sweden. It's not Norway and Denmark, so don't confuse that, please. So Nordencaster, these guys are built for colonial and naval play. Trade efficiency, morale of armies, so they'll be able to stick around and fight, which is a good thing because Susdal is big. In fact, Susdal controlled everything. It controlled all the Ark Horde stuff, and I think think I had to expand these two as well slightly. Seriously, this country was massive, and I needed to cut it down a little, but they should be able to fight them. Tech cost, development cost, they can build up their territories and then get more colonies that way. Light ships, they can actually do some of the trade. Global settler increase, that's fairly explanatory. Land force limits, they can have a bigger army, and infantry combat ability, so their armies can fight better, kind of like Sweden in vanilla. So later on, they won't probably be able to like go toe to toe with Brancaster, but they won't be bad. They definitely won't be bad. And also, I just gave them the paradox sign because, you know, it's Sweden. And paradox are usually fairly biased towards them. Next up is, and I'm sure some of you will be happy to see, Byzancaster. This is Byzantium. And they are kind of poised to become the next emperor again. Or the Roman emperor rather. And they're actually... They're a good power, but they're unfortunately positioned that they are the only one completely surrounded by other casters. I think all the others I gave expansion space to, but I just couldn't here. Unfortunately, it's just too like close up. Grecaster over here probably won't be too aggressive. Huncaster and Ottocaster probably will. So it will be a challenge, as always, to play Byzancaster. But then again, they could expand into the hordes or, you know, go elsewhere in the Mediterranean. I've not done much with North Africa, for example, except for the nomadic horde there. So their specials are development costs, so they can build up what they have. Diplomatic reputations, they can get some allies. So they might actually be able to ally with their neighbours. So this could be a double-edged sword. It could be really good for them, it could also be really, really bad. And infantry combat ability, that's kind of the legacy of the Roman legions. Fort defense, so they'll be a very defensive, much like Jutcaster are. Disciplined, they can fight harder. National tax, actually a very high national tax, so they'll be making more money from the territories they have. Their galley combat ability, they're one of the few I've actually given galley combat to, so they should become fairly competent in the Mediterranean, though they do not have the expanded force limit like some of their other competitors have. Tech costs, so they'll actually have some tech monarch points to spend on the development reduction. Did I give them? Yeah, development cost. Okay. Morale of armies and prestige. Very high prestige. That's like the dignity of the Roman Empire, which they're trying to rebuild. So loads of prestige. If they survive, they'll probably be quite good. If they survive. I did a test game. They did not survive. But they put up a fight, but they did not survive. I think they were the only one who didn't. Oh no, Stormcaster and Lancaster actually did really bad against the Highlands and Wessex. So we'll see what happens in this game. And actually Wessex is really, really strong. So Lancaster is going to struggle because they still have the south of England and that's very wealthy. I was hoping that the random generation would split this area up, but it didn't. Well, Highlands is a little more homogeneous, so I'm not too surprised about that. Okay, so that's Byzancaster done. Caster. For the very simple reason that Cascaster just sounded stupid. This is Castile. They are poised for some North African expansion, though actually they are surrounded by Morocco down there, Porcaster up here, and Aracaster over here. So they do have some space in Badajoz and Aleccio. Ooh, Aleccio again. Is there any Picardy? No. Good. Bastards. So, Caster. Their specials are national tax modifiers, they get more money, and colonial range. I think they are the only ones with the range, so these guys should be an early colonizer. Morale of armies, so they can actually, you know, fight for themselves. Settler increase, so they get colonies quicker. Development costs, so they can get more of their home provinces built up. Trade steering, so they can meddle with trade and start coming to Castile. Missionary strength, because they are on the border with Muslim nations and I thought they might need it. Disciplined, they can fight harder, and global tariffs, so they can get more money out of the colonies, hopefully without liberty desire. I have not tested that, so I'm not entirely sure. Also, I read somewhere that global tariffs comes out of the income of the colony. Obviously that makes sense, but even these bonuses are kind of counterproductive because the bonus is not a bonus to the money you take from them, it just increases the amount of money you get. Sorry, you take. It does not increase the amount of money you get somehow with weird magic like trade works. So we'll see. And their cap off is yearly navy tradition, so their navies will be stronger. Okay, that is Caster. Next up, Otto Costa. Ottocaster are basically the Ottomans. National tax, so they have more money. Aggressive expansion, so they can expand stuff more quickly. Better. Right, yeah. So the Ottomans had decided to experiment a bit. Rather than having big armies, they've got elite armies in terms of how their troops fight. It's not necessarily discipline or morale, but rather like their combat abilities. I've never really done that before, so I was kind of intrigued to see how that would work. Land force limits quite high, 22.5% more, so they'll have a big army. Religious unity, because there's lots of Orthodox over here and Shia over there, so it should help them out. Plus they have the special estate, which requires non-Muslim provinces, so that would mean they can use them. Naval force limits, they can actually put out a navy, though it does not have any bonuses, it's just more ships. National unrest, don't remember why I gave them that, maybe a mistake. Just so they're more solid, I guess, and there you go. Infantry combat and culture conversion, so they can convert people to Ottoman or Turkish. So yeah, artillery plus 15, cavalry plus 10, infantry plus 10. We'll see if that helps them or not. And kind of gave them, it's a bit of a joke, it's the Byzantine crest with green around it, because you know that's kind of what the Ottomans do. Next up, Vencaster. These were a little tricky because Venice has the unfortunate thing of being an end node, but easily the weakest. Like English Channel is fed into by loads of people, there's no other ends by it. And Genoa is just so much bigger and so much stronger than Venice. So any money going towards Venice usually gets picked up by the Genoa people, because there's generally more of them. So I've tried to factor that into how they're built, but we'll see how it works. Their specials are global trade power, obviously the trade power. Galley combat ability, so their galleys fight better. Okay, they were one of the others, so it's Byzantium and Venice who are going to have the good ships. And fort maintenance, so they can actually maintain the forts and stuff they have, especially if they start picking up some of the islands from Islecaster. Trade efficiency, more money, interest, so they can actually raise armies quickly with cheap loans. Available mercenaries, they have more troops available to them. Naval force limits, obviously. Development costs, they can build up these provinces and increase the trade value here in the Venice node. Mercenary costs are cheaper mercenaries, and mercenary maintenance. The mercenaries are even cheaper. So these guys are going to have a really surprisingly big army of mercenaries. Not much manpower and stuff, but when they get attacked, they'll be able to raise an army extremely quickly and respond. And if they lose troops, they'll be able to rebuild like in no time. So that should be interesting, because I've not given anyone else quite such big mercenary ability. Okay, Morcaster. Don't worry, we're getting towards the end of the list. Morcaster is Morocco, and I saw a development game with Paradox actually playing, and Johan, the studio lead, was playing as Morocco, and he actually managed to colonize the New World. So I thought, you know what, that's actually kind of a cool idea. So Morocco has global trade power, because, you know, trade's good. Light ship costs, so they can compete with the Spanish and all the other trading powers. There's another reason for that I'll explain in a moment. Mercenary costs, they can use that money. Development costs, so their homelands are better than the colonies. Inflation reduction, because they do have gold mines, and they're also south, so they'll be going to South America where there is more gold, usually. Production efficiency, similar reasons, though, like their stuff pays more. Available mercenaries, a huge amount of mercenaries, so any money they bring in from the New World will be able to put to good use, and a little bit of trade efficiency. Now, the reason that I was careful about where I position them, first of all, and also giving them the like trade power and light ship cost thing, is because they're in a position to intercept any trade going to Sevilla, and Sevilla feeds into Genoa. So they could actually do quite a lot of damage if they manage to seize the trade coming around Africa from the Far East, once that trade opens, or from the Americas. So yeah, they have the potential to really kind of screw with people, which will be interesting. That is Morocco. Next up is Grecaster. Grecaster is kind of a experiment. These guys have almost no combat abilities. This could be dangerous or it could be extremely good for them. They do, however, have extremely cheap development costs. So all their development is 20% cheaper, plus tech is 5% cheaper, so they'll have 5% more monarch points to put into that cheap development. You see where I'm going here? And then they have cheap ideas as well, so that's even more monarch points they have available. Diplomatic relations, so they can get some allies in to help protect them. Build costs, they can build up all their high development provinces. Provincial trade power, so again, this is similar reasoning to, who was it? Provencaster and Francaster, so any trade that they produce will stay here. And once again, they are in a very pivotal area. Ragusa is another gateway, and Ragusa feeds into both Venice and Genoa, so they can kind of play gatekeeper on who gets the money, if anyone. They might just keep it themselves. And because there'll be a very high development area, they will have a lot of provincial trade. Likewise, they're also in the Constantinople area. I purposefully gave them these territories so they can meddle in Constantinople as well, which is another kind of gateway area. And they could take money from Byzantium and the Byzancaster and the Ottocasters. So their other powers are national tax modifier, just for a bit more money. Attrition for enemies. So these are also extremely defensive in much the same way that Jutcaster are. And in fact, Jutcaster are 1.5, these guys are 2. If they get attacked, it will be taking a lot of damage attacking them. And diplomatic reputation, just so their allies are better. Not only do they have more, but they're better allies. So no actual combat abilities themselves. This is purely about fielding large armies and navies because of the wealth of Greece. Kind of a thing on what's really happening. Kind of. No, I really did it because it's like the cradle of civilization. They're usually very philosophical and bright about that type of thing, although recent events do not necessarily reflect that. And then finally, the faction I had to bring in because I realised I didn't have enough really in the HRE. So Thurcaster here. It's merged two countries, including the current emperor. So the emperor's weak, so I'm expecting the emperor to change. Thurcaster are kind of similar to Grecaster. They are built to develop. So they are surrounded by some really... I've forgotten. Huncaster and Polcaster. Did I just not write them down? Apparently not. Okay, I'll get to them in a minute. So Thurcaster, their abilities are development cost, cheap, very cheap. Tech cost, again, similar reason. They do not, however, have the idea cost, so they won't have as many monarch points as Grecaster do, because they're in a more dangerous position. Surrounded by all the aggressive Germans, particularly Brancaster, who are made for war, Burguncaster, who are France, who are, and Poland and Hungary, which we'll get to in a minute. Idea cost, they do have idea cost. Diplomatic reputation, force limits, they can actually have a decent army. Build cost, they can build buildings and all the high development of the areas. More national manpower, so their armies are not, sorry, yeah, they are bigger, but they basically can fight for longer. More manpower modifier and more manpower recovery. So instead of relying on trade, these guys are relying on the home production. Again, another kind of experiment. We'll see how they do. Second to last, because I've actually finished my list, I just forgot these two. Polcaster is basically the combined ideas of Poland and Lithuania in a much smaller area. So there will be hard. Plus, and this is the real reason I put Hungary and Poland here, they're right next to the hordes. So these will be high warfare areas. The hordes in the east are very, very strong. They will do a lot of damage. And I personally did that. Like the earlier start European Universalis 3s were interesting because the hordes were a real pressure on the Eastern Europe. And then eventually Eastern Europe will recover and kind of push back. But how long will that take is kind of the question. So Poland. These guys have a similar military philosophy to Thurcaster without the development. So they have high attacks modifier, so they can actually pay for the armies they are invariably going to need. Land force limits, though their army will be very, very big. National manpower, so their big armies don't just die out. Aggressive expansions, they can actually expand if they have the opportunity. Stability cost, just so they're a little more stable. War exhaustion is reduced, so they can fight harder and longer. Prestige decay is decreased, so all the prestige they're earning from fighting will burn off less quickly, so they keep their morale up. Manpower recovery, so their manpower recovers quicker. And missionaries, because they're on the border with actually quite a few Orthodox. Orthodox have got a lot further west than they usually do. Okay, so that is them. Their specials are... Oh, and their top off is land maintenance, so their armies are cheaper to maintain. Finally, Haan Kasta. Similar position to Polcaster, similar reasoning. They have got national tax modifier and cavalry cost. Their cavalry ability. So cavalry will be good and they can afford more of them. Their other things are morale of armies, strong aggressive expansion, actually even cheaper to expand than for Poland, which is why they could be dangerous to, for example, Byzantium. Bigger armies, even bigger than Poland, I think. Yeah, no, same. unrest, so even if they have war exhaustion, then that won't be a problem. And then also reducing war exhaustion, because that's a diplo point and they don't have much to spend diplomatic points on. National manpower modifier, and then production efficiency. So once they do start taking land, that land will become more productive. And that is all of the powers. So I'll do a very quick summary in 2 minutes, because this video should end very soon. So first up, Lancaster. They are good at naval combat and like embargoing other people, not necessarily trade for themselves. Hollcaster, they are all about trade, and they have big ships to actually protect that trade. Stormcaster are actually colonial and trade. They can do both. However, because of their neighbours, they might be a little fragile because their armies aren't that great. Porcaster were mostly about steering trade around and keeping it in Seville here, and also colonial stuff. Francaster, these guys are kind of the counter to Lancaster, Stormcaster, and probably Wessex and Hollcaster. They keep trade here and probably in Champagne as well, which is the region below it. They also have extremely good armies, so they should be able to fight very hard. Provencaster, they're kind of a foil to lots of other people. They're here to screw up with Genoa and the Genoese node. They're also supposed to be a colonial power, so they could actually get money in and bypass Iberia if Iberia is not careful, and then bring it into themselves or Genoa, depending on where they want to foist it. And they have good trade and good militaries and good mercenaries, lots and lots of mercenaries, so that's one to look out for. Burguncaster, these are playing for the HRE. They're here with a strong army, lots of prestige, lots of diplomacy. Meteor Caster, they are a wealthy inland nation. They have no ports, however they should have a lot of money in the production stuff that they have, which they will then be able to spend on good artillery and things like that. Islecaster, these guys are spread over islands. They will have a large navy and be able to manipulate a lot of different people's trade. They're one to look out for. Auscaster, these are also another diplomatic one with military backing, so they're not going to be a pushover. They're also playing for the HRE. Brancaster, these are your elite troops. They will fight harder and longer than anyone else, but there aren't that many of them. Jutcaster, defensive extraordinaire. They're basically turtling up and then staying there. They do, however, have the ability through ships to expand elsewhere, so their homelands can be extremely secure. Nordencaster, they are set up for colonial stuff over into the west. They are also got fairly good ships and armies, large armies and ships in fact, so lots of them. So yeah, they're basically playing Sweden. Byzancaster, they are playing the prestige game and the development game, and they have decent quality ships but not many of them. Caster, which is Castile, good for colonialism and some trade, and also to kind of rob money from Genoa. They're going to try and keep it here in Seville. Where am I? Ottocaster, kind of the Ottomans. However, these guys have large armies and large navies, so this is going to be more about numbers, quality over quantity. Vencaster is playing as Venice, but a very, very mercenary charge to Venice. They will be more aggressive and more powerful on land than they usually are, so they'll be able to break out of this Venice node, possibly into Genoa, or just disrupt Genoa so much that Venice becomes more profitable. Morcaster is Morocco, so this is the African ambitions going to the New World. They also have trade in order to keep it here in Sus rather than spreading it to Sevilla or Genoa. Aracaster is Aragon. They're here to kind of counter Porcaster, Caster and Provencaster. They should have a lot of money. They'll have big armies and lots of manpower. So yeah, Aracaster are going to be good. Grecaster, these guys are purely about the development game. They're going to be building very tall, probably not very wide. They'll be hard to conquer because of the attrition, which people will take when they are attacked. Thurcaster, who are another HRE, they're going to build tall in a similar way to Grecaster do, but instead of relying on allies, these guys will be with their own armies. They won't be as strong as Brancaster or any of the others, but they should be able to hold their own. Polcaster, who have very big armies, and they should be able to expand fairly rapidly depending on how the hordes next to them do. This will be an aggressive game. Likewise, Huncaster, not quite as aggressive because there aren't as many of them around. However, you have more of the casters nearby who could do damage. And again, they are built on having strong armies. And a lot of staying power in battles, actually, like they have the unrest and the war exhaustion. So Huncaster will be tough to take down. They'll win wars of attrition. That is the summary of all of them. That was slightly more than 2 minutes, but I hope that was enough. If you have any questions about like how various countries are supposed to play out, then please do ask. I'm only going to play as the casters. I'm not going to be interested in any others because I've not set up the ideas. Likewise the hordes. The hordes are there to make it more interesting. So please let me know, who should I play as? I'm really intrigued and looking forward to finding out. Thank you very much. Please do like and subscribe if you're interested in seeing where this series goes, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.